How do you make purely good heroes interesting? You know, characters who go around inspiring others to be better, to be more like them. So much of modern fiction these days prefers darker, grittier, more morally mixed heroes that even traditionally Paragon characters like Superman have been reimagined in more dramatic, darker ways, literally and figuratively in the case of the Snyderverse. I mean, his character arc in Man of Steel is, should I save these people? I don't know. It's a joke. It's a joke. Part of it is that people want to read and write characters who are more morally and personally conflicted, and that's fine. Sorry, this one is just absolutely demanding cuddles, aren't you, baby? You know, characters like Deckard in Blade Runner 2049 who can become disillusioned, or characters who are gonna struggle over what's right and wrong, like Jaime Lannister, and Paragon heroes aren't gonna do that so much. So for a lot of people, they're just not very interesting. But that doesn't have to be the case, and here are 4 things that you can do to make pure good Paragon heroes fascinating. Like number 1, getting Nebula, the streaming service that was started by and is owned by creators, us, real people, where we don't have to worry about the algorithm being demonetized. It's awesome. And the sponsor of today's video. Use my link down below to get it super cheap and access to my exclusive Beyond Writing series. Part 1, being the Paragon isn't easy. Captain America.
I can do this all day.
He is probably the most famous example of a Paragon character today, and I wouldn't call him boring. No. So much of the tension in his stories comes from how difficult it is to keep choosing good. In Winter Soldier, he has half of his friends turn on him, the government as well, all because he believes the right thing to do is helping Bucky, and nothing will deter him from that. He resists the temptation of a huge surveillance system for moral reasons, the way that other characters like Nick Fury just don't. It makes his job harder, but it's his principles. In Civil War, he ends up sacrificing his position, his citizenship, alienating his friends, and destroying the Avengers virtually as a force in order to do what is right in his mind. So, you know, with these Paragon characters, you've got to consider how costly it is to follow their unbreakable moral rules, and repeatedly increases the tension for your purely good hero. Let their morality create obstacles, let it damage relationships, let it create difficult dilemmas. Cap's friend or his country, his morals or his allies. Putting a Paragon in a position where every choice is a bad one can be a really interesting story to tell, but fundamentally, if being a Paragon is easy, then you kind of start sliding into that Mary Sue territory where, you know, they're always right and nothing ever goes wrong and everyone's meant to agree with them. But if it's hard, if it's a struggle, then you're telling a story about a good person in really difficult times, and we love stories like that. People often say that Paragon heroes are simple because, you know, they're not wrestling with what's right and wrong, and that's a type of tension that we really like today. But why does someone choose to be good all the time? How do you know that you're doing good? What does it do to how you view other people and the world? These are really interesting character nuances that can create a really unique perspective, a really unique person. Sometimes being the Paragon hero can create tension with other characters.
Sometimes I want to punch you in your perfect teeth.
Because you might be looking at this person who seems to have it all together, they're always right, they're so certain of who they are, and it's frustrating. Like, you don't think they're gonna understand or maybe respect how other people around them even struggle, even if they are inspiring, even if they are the ones saying you gotta do better all the time. It can create some distance between them and, you know, other anti-hero type characters. This is actually why I adore Frodo. He's pure of heart, he takes on the ring out of self-sacrifice and not a desire for power, he inspires others around him, but in the end, he succumbs to the ring. You know, Tolkien is almost making an interesting commentary on the Paragon archetype here, you know, that nobody can make the right choice every time. We are human. The Paragon doesn't really exist. That true good is found in how we strive to do that good for as long as we can, and Frodo failing only at the last moment. But don't have time to get into all that here. Let's look at an extreme example in Ned Stark, right? Ned Stark is kind of a Paragon character. He's a morally right and likable hero, but he is a Paragon in a world where being morally right has no relationship to whether or not you solve the tension in the story. Here, being a Paragon isn't just difficult, it makes you dead. And for a writer, that has thematic and symbolic meaning in the world of Westeros. Martin has written a world that critiques fantasy ideas like the good leader being the moral one, or that bad people are always met with justice, that things turn out all right in the end. Does the power of friendship even matter in this world, which the Paragon will often tap into, right? The place and fate and suffering of the Paragon character is going to say a lot about your themes. But perhaps even more importantly, Part 2, Paragons have feelings too. If they don't struggle, then it can feel a little bit like, "A wizard did it." Except this time it's a morally upstanding wizard that knows exactly what they're doing at all times. This is another misconception. So, because traditional Paragon heroes are usually morally right, likable, inspire others around them, and generally get the job done, they don't tend to have as much of a character arc. Lyra Belacqua from Philip Pullman's His Dark Material series is kinda a Paragon character, at least in the first book. She does what's right because it's right, is undeterrable, goes around inspiring people and turning enemies into allies. She fits a lot of the tropes. But she's also lonely. She never feels like she truly has a home and struggles with the fact her parents have largely rejected her in life. Lyra doesn't really struggle with moral issues and she doesn't have a huge character arc in the book, but she does struggle with social issues and grief after the loss of one of her oldest and only friends, with betrayal after betrayal because she wants to believe the best in people around her. Doctor Who actually takes the fact that the Doctor inspires so many people around them and subverts it by highlighting how it means that people keep on sacrificing their lives for his causes, basically.
The man who abhors violence, never carrying a gun. But this is the truth, Doctor. You take ordinary people and you fashion them into weapons.
These are people who want to turn their enemies into allies rather than beat them up. And being the Paragon, how do you live with that? Being morally right doesn't mean they aren't reckless, and it doesn't mean that they're smart either. Labrador heroes can be a lot of fun. Idealism can make a character blind to how others are treating them, or the true threat at hand. And these feelings don't need to be turned into much of an arc, but it really does help when they're expressed. But even though Paragon heroes, like Paddington, don't tend to have much of a character arc, this is where the lines blur between all these tropes, because I love when they make an exception to that for a Paragon. Sometimes a Paragon can be wrong. Maybe they were tricked, they didn't have all the information, or their inflexible morality meant they ignored some important context and it led them down the wrong path. Or some other characters might just legitimately disagree. Your Paragon doesn't have to represent the perfect moralism that you as the author want to dictate to the readers. Now, Aang in The Last Airbender isn't truly a Paragon, but I love the episode The Southern Raiders, where Katara confronts the man who killed her mother, and Aang insists that forgiveness is the only path. This is something that a Paragon would probably say. But what makes that episode so clever is that the story does not tell you that Aang is right, like a lot of stories might say the Paragon is right. Instead, it explores how sometimes things can hurt us so deeply, they're so traumatic that forgiveness isn't really possible, and that's okay. Revealing a Paragon in a more morally nuanced world, that can be a really interesting place to explore them in, the way they think and why they think the way they do, that it can expose some of their blind spots, it can develop their relationships with other characters. They can have the purest of intentions, but sometimes there is no single right path to take. And this can cause conflict, even in extreme circumstances, turning them into the antagonist, if, say, your story is about an anti-hero trying to get revenge. There are stories where that's understandable, that some people might even say is morally right. But it is because the Paragon hero does not typically have a huge amount of character development that the real function they play in the narrative is Part 3, how the Paragon changes characters around them. The Doctor from Doctor Who is one of my favourite characters of all time, and they are, for the most part, a Paragon-type character. Broadly, they do what is right, because it is right, ceaselessly and without fail. They're are exceptions, I'll say.
The laws of time are mine, and they will obey me!
But generally, they fly around inspiring others to be better. They're humble despite being the brightest person in every room. They're kind to everyone high and low. They abhor violence despite being capable of it, and they don't become a god even though they have the power over all of time and space. Again, with exceptions.
The laws of time are mine, and they will obey me!
But so much of Doctor Who turns not on how the Doctor changes as a person for the better, but how he changes the people he meets through sheer force of personality and goodness. I mean, I'm not even kidding when I say that a huge plot point is how in a dire moment the Doctor cries out for help and a million planets come to his aid because he has inspired them all to be better. Donna Noble literally starts out as the meme.
I'm 27 years old. I've no money and no prospects. I'm already a burden to my parents.
She's got no self-esteem, she thinks she's incapable and worthless, but the Doctor inspires and helps her to see herself in a new light.
And for one moment, one shining moment, she was the most important woman in the whole wide universe.
She still is. She's my daughter.
And maybe you should tell her that once in a while.
Character arcs usually involve a complicated web of what a character thinks they want, what they truly need, and lies that they believe about themselves or the world. And the Paragon will usually be able to see through the lie. Like, the Doctor knows that Donna is special. In fact, he believes this so firmly, so much that he actually doesn't even realize for a long time that Donna genuinely thinks she isn't worth anything special. He thinks that of course that's not true. It's so obvious to him that he doesn't even consider that her self-esteem is really that low. Sometimes they will be able to see or represent what a character truly needs, like the Doctor convinces another character, Captain Jack Harkness, one of those anti-heroes who starts out motivated by money and sex, that he doesn't want to be a lone wolf out for himself, that what he truly wants, what he truly needs, is a cause and purpose, to be part of something greater. So if you're crafting a Paragon hero, consider how they might fit into the arcs of other characters around them. Give them scenes to make decisions that other characters will also have to face up to at some point later in the story, and then they can remember back to what this character did. If another character is about to give up, show the Paragon pushing on, and let that motivate the other to keep going, you know? If a character is deeply struggling with something like addiction or loneliness, have the Paragon reach out, let them empathize, let them become the nuts and bolts of other characters' arcs. This is why the death of a Paragon character can affect the story so much. They're often the linchpin that brought the characters together, that kept them together, that changed them, and now they have to wonder who they are without this person. Do they fall back into old ways? Do they try and live up to the standard they set? Do they step into their shoes? Does it inspire them further? Ned Stark's death, mind you, was basically the inciting incident for a lot of the other stories in the series. Like, that was pretty much when all of the different perspectives split off, all because he died, and they're all thinking about him for the books to come. And this is why I think in a lot of Paragon stories I've noticed the tension, the plot, the story is often resolved by the other characters around them who do have those character arcs. They might play a huge role in their development, but in the end, it's these characters who have to come together and solve the story. And it's not always the case, but it does create some extra narrative thrust to kind of their role in the story, that they inspire and change all the characters around them, and then that lets the story resolve itself. And it's why Paragon characters tend to appear in group settings a lot more as well, you know, think Superman. But there is a problem with them, and that is part 4, the problem with reactive scenes. Reactive scenes are where something has just happened, there's been some sort of conflict, and then the characters react to it, they feel, they face a dilemma, and then they make a decision. So in Avatar, you know, Zhao just killed the moon spirit, and everyone is horrified, they're reacting. Then Aang faces a dilemma, he doesn't know what to do, and he decides to merge with the ocean spirit. The problem is, with these 3 beats, where does the Paragon come in? Because if they typically know what they believe morally, then the dilemma and decision beats, even if they struggle a little bit, aren't going to carry as much weight. So I've been looking at it, and Paragon reactive scenes typically work best with 2 things. One, the reaction beat, right? You focus on that beat. So Lyra's struggles don't derail her. Not usually. They only tend to fuel her desire to do right by others more, to go on a bigger, better adventure. But we see her express a myriad of emotions that make her relatable and interesting anyway. You know, grief, heartbreak as she meets a kid who has had his soul ripped from his body, I'm not kidding, and wonders what that would feel like. It's pretty horrifying. You know, people process emotions in all sort of unique and interesting ways, and that can give characters real nuance, even if they know what they're doing morally. So exploring their emotional reaction to any given conflict beat is really, really important. 2, the dilemma and decision beats are more often about the decisions of the characters around them. So in Doctor Who, there's an episode where 2 characters are on the verge of committing genocide and giving it into their worst natures after being beaten. The Doctor pushes them not to do that in a powerful speech about the power of friendship, basically. And the speech, by the way, is the Doctor's reaction beat. It is his emotional reaction, but he does not for a second question whether war or genocide is a good idea. There is no dilemma or decision for him here, not really. Partly because he's seen how terrible both of those are already. No, his role, his emotional response plays a vital part in the other characters facing their dilemma and decision. That's the tension in the story and his function in that scene. So the tension comes from their decision, not the Doctor's, which again feeds into what I was talking about before, where oftentimes the Paragon will be the nuts and bolts in their development, but the other characters will be the ones resolving the tension. But if you do all of these, then you're probably going to have a Paragon hero who's pretty interesting, who, when they do stuff in the plot, isn't going to feel like an extremely upstanding morally wizard did it. There are boxes that we have drawn around particular types of characters that I want to be clear are not instructions for writing. It's so much more important to write about people and ideas and interesting stories than to try and fit them to some sort of mold. And I mean, in a lot of stories, terms like hero or villain don't really mean much at all. You know, what do they mean in something like Gone Girl or Ned Vizzini's It's Kind of a Funny Story? You've got characters who I guess are protagonists and who I guess are good, but to make them a hero? I don't know. These are just terms that we're sort of making up, and thinking of your characters in terms of tropes rather than as pieces of your art can be kind of restrictive, I think. Just something to keep in mind, that stories move people, not tropes. I've made a video discussing the especially moving story of Frodo and Sam, at least for me, you know, both as Paragon and tragic heroes, what their story means, what we can learn from it. And it's all part of my Beyond Writing series, which is a host of videos that builds on what we learn here, but can totally stand on its own as well. This job is amazing, but it can also be unreliable, given my entire life depends on 1, how many views I get, and 2, the demonetizational algorithmic whims of a giant corporation. But Nebula means I don't have to worry about that as much because we own it and it supports us directly and it has all of our content, and including all of my Beyond Writing series. Lindsay Ellis has this hour-long video about how they even adapted Lord of the Rings in the first place. It's really good. And we can make whatever we want. I mean, I just sunk way too much time and money into this whole video on Japanese war crimes, and I wouldn't have been able to take that risk without Nebula, you know, behind me. And if you sign up using my link down below, you'll get it for as little as like $2.50 a month, and you'll be supporting this kind of work and me and Willow's annoying little face directly. And you get 2-in-1 free access to Nebula classes, where our creators host classes on how to be, well, you know, creators, you know. Tony Santos teaching you how to edit, Sam from Windover talking about creating compelling viral videos, or the business side of things, you know. Great for aspiring creators or folks who just want to see behind the curtain. And you'll be supporting me and this kind of work directly. And if you do, thank you. Summary with Momo. Take us away, Momo. Firstly, a Paragon hero might be right, likable, and get things done, but these characters tend to work better when it is difficult and costly to keep choosing good. It creates extra unnecessary objects, it damages relationships, and creates dilemmas. Secondly, the place and fate of your Paragon hero can carry an enormous thematic and symbolic meaning in your story. Consider if there is a relationship between being good and winning. Thirdly, Paragons can have struggles and emotions too, even if these don't culminate in a big character arc. They help to humanize them, and having no moral quandaries doesn't mean that they can't be reckless or stupid. Fourthly, sometimes it can be really fascinating to make an exception and show the Paragon not being right, having them learn something, or it being so complicated that they don't know the right path to take. Fifthly, compelling Paragons will usually develop the characters around them even if they don't have an arc of their own. Think about how they fit into the wants, needs, and lives of other characters and consider giving them scenes to play into those. Sixthly, Paragon reactive scenes focus more on the reaction beat and the dilemma and decisions of other characters around them, so drawing tension from other characters here helps. And that is us, my fellow nerds. Do you have a favorite Paragon character? Let me know down in the description below. And if you haven't got it yet, go pick up On Writing and World Building Volume 2 and Volume 1 if you haven't got it, but this one is better. They're totally separate. They don't have anything in common. You can buy them both. Anyways, stay nerdy, and I will see you in the future.